I want us to become brothers again like we used to be, and for us to find ourselves and bond with each other. Can we agree to that?
Opinions vary.
Welcome to this bonus episode of Three Brothers Filmcast. So on the website over the last few weeks, in anticipation of Avatar: The Way of Water, we've been doing a James Cameron retrospective, giving very deep dive reviews, almost essays on each one of his feature films. And so I thought we would have spend an episode, a shorter episode, just talking about the films of James Cameron and kind of keeping people's focus on his work as everybody, like everybody's going to go see Avatar: The Way of the Water over the Christmas holidays. I thought we'd maybe start with the fact that, Anton, I remember when we started this retrospective, when we were talking about it, you kind of brought up this idea that you were the James Cameron skeptic of the three of us, because you very much knew that, like, I'm a huge Avatar booster. Anders really loves The Abyss, but you kind of approached it with a little bit more trepidation. So I'm curious whether revisiting all these movies has changed your mind at all about James Cameron, or like, what do you make of his films now?
Well, I think part of my initial skepticism was I knew I had to be a balancing act against you, Aaron, because I was worried you're going to go off the deep end or fly to the moon in your praise, and I'm worried that maybe you have. But no, I think my overall, like, any sort of skepticism I had is gone. And I think it's confirmed for me that Cameron is one of our great blockbuster filmmakers. And I think a lot of it is just that it occurred to me that I had not actually watched basically any Cameron movies probably since Avatar came out in 2009. Like, it had been years. Like, I was looking in my movie journal, and it's been years since I saw Terminator
You don't
2,
just watch T2 occasionally?
Abyss. Well, so this is the thing, is that, like, I've never been like a huge Cameron fan. I remember when I was getting into movies, watching The Abyss, the Terminator movies, Aliens, things like that, thinking that they were really good blockbusters. And you're like, okay, this guy makes really good blockbusters. But as I said in my reviews, like, I didn't see Titanic when it came out. I didn't really particularly like it when I saw it on home video. When I saw Avatar originally in 2009, I was like blown away by the immersive experience of seeing it in 3D. And I've only ever seen it in theaters. But I actually, midway through the movie, was sort of losing interest in the actual storyline. So I was coming at Cameron being like, okay, like, is this guy so great? And I think in a lot of ways he is, especially as a technical filmmaker, making films of exceptional clarity, hugely entertaining, crowd pleasing. So, I think he's legitimately great. And this reminded me and confirmed for me that he is, and he should be remembered. I still don't come away from this being like, you know what? Like, I'm never going to watch Cameron movies as frequently as I watch my Spielbergs and my Lucas films. His movies just don't really speak to me in the same way. But I am reminded that he is really good. And in a few movies we can talk about later, I'll let you guys speak. I have sort of drastically changed my mind about. So I don't know, in terms of you guys, like, was there any key takeaways? Because I feel like in some sense I was worried that, like, well, I feel like at this point I'm like, I'm here to kind of, even though I'm thinking Cameron's great, I'm here to kind of block you guys from turning this site into like a Cameron stan site.
One thing I think's fun is that Cameron is like one of the other great Canadian filmmakers, and so we did our retrospective on Cronenberg. So it's a nice balance, and Cronenberg is obviously in some ways very, very different. In many ways, very, very different from Cameron in terms of his style of filmmaking and that kind of thing. But I think it's it's been nice to dig into someone who is I think one of the great English language popular filmmakers, who comes from Canada. That said, like, for me, as Anton alluded, like, and then you alluded, Aaron, like, I was a fan of his early films, particularly I really liked The Abyss. I
remember watching that quite a few times with you.
Because I brought to this day, which is still probably the only decent, since there's no Blu-ray release of The Abyss.
It's coming out in 4K soon.
Good.
It actually is.
Yes, they've had the file for a while. The old special edition DVD from, I think, 2001.
Is that the Steelbook one?
It's not a Steelbook, no, but it's one of those Fox 2-disc special edition ones. Anyway, still like that movie a lot. I was always a big fan of Terminator 2. It's one of, as you said, Aaron, it's one of those, you throw it on and just roll with it, or you catch it on television even, and you you see a scene midway through the movie on TV and you just keep watching it to the end because it just draws you in. It's one of the great action sci-fi movies of all time. I gained a new appreciation for the original Terminator, maybe, time in my life and just appreciating what he does with such a low budget. It's one of my very favorite, if not my favorite Cameron film now. Like, I think the Terminator is, as I said, it made such an outrageous comparison in our first roundtable.
Yeah, I still
It is kind of a Citizen Kane in the sense that this is a young guy being finally given the keys to the to work in Hollywood, and very few people have debuts like that. I mean, or very early films. Something similar would be like Spielberg with Jaws. Like, I know it's his third feature, but still, Cameron bursts onto the scene in that way. So I really love that one. I think that first film run and is fantastic. I also
it might be. Can we just say, do you think that there's? I was just trying to think. Is there a director who has that's a really impressive run of four movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Terminator, the
Aliens.
Abyss. Sorry, Terminator, Aliens, The Abyss, Terminator 2. Those four movies, you're it'd be hard pressed to find another director who does that 4 in a row.
Yeah, but
not for one genre either. That's the
exactly.
thing.
Yeah.
But I probably this time around I appreciated Titanic more than the last time I watched it, which was probably about a decade ago.
Too.
I also went to the theater in September to see the re-release of Avatar, the original film, in the 4K IMAX experience, and I haven't seen that since the theater either. And my estimation of Avatar went up quite a bit, so I'm also much more excited for the new one. So.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things about this specific retrospective compared to some of the others, it's probably, we've done popular film retrospectives. We did James Bond, we did Star Wars. We're looking at kind of popular modes and these through lines within the production history or the filmmakers, what they're trying to do with this stuff. But it was, in those two cases, it's not one filmmaker. Even as much as Star Wars, it's George Lucas looms over it. Obviously, there's other people involved, especially with the Disney ones. And so with this, it was really interesting to examine a filmmaker who I think a lot of people take for granted as a kind of popular filmmaker, right? And it's the idea of, well, what is there to know about James Cameron beyond he makes a really good action scene and he has cool sci-fi stuff. He's a bit corny and he's the biggest director ever in terms of box office success. And it's that kind of approaching it in a way to dig into, there's not just technical or entertainment successes here or through lines. There is a genuine tourist approach, a genuine obsessive filmmaker read that you can give for any, the greatest auteurs of all time. But it's just interesting to read this through line in a guy who every single one of his movies fits that bill. Except for his documentaries, but even those are meant for general documentary.
Even the documentaries,
offices,
though, reveal the same interests and obsessions, even if they're a different mode of filmmaking.
But it's so fascinating to be this is a man who has made the dichotomy of technology his central obsession. Every time AI, every time robotics, automation, every time advanced weaponry comes up in our news, Terminator is always a thing. And so I'm listening to say a CBC Ideas podcast, and they're talking about what are the threats of automation and this and that, and then somebody's like, well, it's not going to be a Terminator, ha 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 ha. Everybody laughs in the audience and stuff, and it's that's one of those iconic things that he's created, this concept of Skynet. The AI comes alive and immediately decides it's going to kill humanity off, and then it's a thing that Stephen Hawking in the last 2 decades of his life became obsessed with as no, there's a real threat. You can't just take this not seriously. But he's also, aside from maybe George Lucas, Ang Lee, Spielberg, to some extent, Robert Zemeckis, he's the most technically obsessed popular filmmaker in Hollywood, in the sense that he invents the technology that allows him to make the next movie. And so how it's so fascinating that the central fixations of James Cameron as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, as a technician are all technological based. He's created the nightmare of technology that gives us the foundation upon which things like the Matrix are built. He also gives us the creative potential of technology in the practical effects work, in the CGI, in the pioneering of motion capture and 3D and new camera technology and deep sea technology. And he seems to build that into the story, especially with, I think, T2, if we look at it as kind of a pivot point, right? The Abyss you get a bit before, but it's this idea of the CGI, or not the CGI, but the creations, the technological creations or characters in the film allow humans a way forward to like heal and learn and actually
Yeah.
become more human in the process. The T-800, Arnold in T2, learning to become like a perfect father to John Connor, is the thing that points, it's like, oh, that's what Cameron thinks technology can be. It's like you can take this destructive thing and turn it into the most amazingly creative thing ever. And it's so interesting. It's in every one of his movies. It's even in Titanic, which, as you said, Anton, is a time travel movie. It's a movie about literally like the film brings the Titanic back to the surface. Like that's what it does.
Are you ready to go back to Titanic?
You know, I was just thinking about, you compared him to a lot of other filmmakers in various ways. Maybe the director who picks up some aspects, weirdly, of the mantle of Cameron the most might be actually Christopher Nolan in some ways, with their technical obsession of like, I mean, Nolan obviously is,
even though they're stylistically highly different.
Stylistically very different, but they both work in popular modes, and they're both like get their auteurist interests into like almost every film very, very deeply. But also just like, you know, people talking about like the way that Christopher Nolan now apparently for like Oppenheimer has like pioneered a new way to like recreate the visual of a nuclear blast. I like the idea that he actually created a nuke, but yeah, you know, so that he didn't have to do it with CGI, or like in Tenet, like we're gonna crash this plane for real, you know.
But also, like, are there two directors who in many ways are kind of humanists, non-religious individuals who have made the idea of movie going and the theatrical experience a religious experience? Like they built that into the very foundation of their whole approach.
Well, I think I actually just think a lot of that is that both Nolan and Cameron, unlike, unfortunately, I think a lot of filmmakers in Hollywood, they deeply respect their audience. And both of these filmmakers often talk about that when they ask you to come to the movie theater for one of their big movies, they have to deliver. It's not this sort of Marvel, like you just show up every few months because we're pumping out another one. Or, you know, or even just other stuff. They legitimately feel the stakes that they have to deliver something that's worth your time, that's both entertaining and like actually has some substance to it. And they genuinely love the craft of it, right? Like both of these guys get their hands dirty. You'll see them like the way that Nolan would get, you know, working with the actual models for the special effects, and Cameron in so many different avenues of the filmmaking process. So these people, they love the craft, they respect the audience, and they're so essential to cinema right now because they're making films where people, part of the brand for them is not just that you're going to get more of the same, is that you're going to get a special experience. He's like, you know, they're like, give me your money and I will give you that special experience. They're not just expecting you to waste your time on them.
Yeah, and it's interesting how both of them are also they're very technically adept, and they're from stories you get in the media and also stories I've heard from people who have worked on these productions, friends of friends and so forth. They're both the type of directors that understand every element of a production, in that they can go up to a key grip, they can go up to a sound technician, they can go to the CGI artist, and they can speak to that specific area of the filmmaking in like a very particular technical sense, so that everybody can be like, oh, they might be a taskmaster in some ways. I think Nolan's a lot more low key. Like he's not going to yell at people in front of everybody, but he might like quietly tell you to do a much better job.
His intensity works in a different engagement.
But everybody respects the fact that like these guys care, they put in the work and they understand. And so I think and then they also have, you know, a deeply committed fan base online to both of them. They're very popular. Their movies, you know, since their second movie, their movies have been hits, every single one. But then you also have a kind of casual dismissal even within the critical establishment, even if they kind of acknowledge that, they're important, but it's just gussed up entertainment. Like at the end of the day, it's not important movies.
So I have just 2 points I want to jump in here. What I find that interesting, what that says about, say, Cameron and like Nolan, I think that's an interesting comparison. So they're both two people whose interest is the filmmaking business, not the business that's going on around films. Neither of these guys seems to really care about living a Hollywood life, right? Neither of them now live in Hollywood, from what I understand, or at least most of the time. Like Cameron's permanently now in New Zealand. they are obsessed with making films and figuring out how to do that and spend so much of their day on these things. And what that reminds me of is another great auteur was Alfred Hitchcock, who treated his making movies like his 9-to-5 job, who showed up in his suit, worked on his movie till dinner time, and then they'd shut down the production. But as soon as he was done one production, he was working on the drafts and doing the drawings for the storyboarding for the next shoot, like someone who just was obsessed with making films and just their whole life was consumed with that. But also there's like an artisanal quality to these people.
Yeah, I would agree with that aspect of comparison between those three directors. I would say that this might actually offer us then a point of contrast for Cameron. Both Nolan and Hitchcock, to me, it's been said, this is not an original thought, that many of their films are self-reflective about cinema, about the act of watching, the act, like people have described Inception as a sort of allegory for filmmaking. Obviously, Vertigo, Rear Window are about watching, and Scopophilia and things like that. Cameron seems to have, whether you think it's successful or not, bigger ambitions. And in that, I think that the long periods of time where he didn't make feature films, whether it was when he dives to the wrecks of the Bismarck and the Titanic in the documentaries, he's trying to solve a mystery in both cases to improve our knowledge of these events. In Aliens of the Deep, there's the moment where the Russian commander of the ship is it's time to do something real. The Keldysh, yeah. He's like, it's time to do something real, to do science, real science. They're going to discover something. And Cameron, the conversations he had, he's very comfortable having conversations with astrophysicists and marine biologists and people, right? And likewise, that as we found in that recent profile on Cameron in GQ, that he is interested in pushing other ideas beyond just movies. Like when he's like, oh, I'm going to invest in lentils and seed crops and things like he doesn't see movies as unimportant. He takes them with full seriousness. But he also, I think, has bigger ambitions in life. Or
he has lots of interests.
He's a true Renaissance man in a sense.
Yeah, there's very few people who are a significant historical explorer, right? Like Cameron is the person who's gone the deepest in the ocean.
Yeah, there's a book in or chapter in Rebecca Keegan's book, The Futurist, which Aaron and I both read and used for our reviews, where it's titled, it's the one on the documentary, is called The Modern Magellan.
Yeah, well, so didn't get eaten by cannibals.
There is definitely a Renaissance man quality to him, and also that sense of the capturing an interest in sort of the range of things in life.
And that leads him, this is maybe where he does have a similarity to Nolan, as you pointed out. He's a humanist. He's deeply invested in people and emotions and connections, not just cold intellectual activity. He wants to move you. He wants to make you feel.
Yeah, and actually, it's sort of interesting. In actual sort of Renaissance humanism, one of the big texts, Pico's On the Dignity of Man. He talks about sort of humans as sort of between the spiritual and the animal, and it's sort of the human potential. You can either make so much of yourself, or you can actually do so little or descend. And it's interesting that this dichotomous view of technology, which we see, is almost it's almost like Pico's view applied to technology, where it's technology can be a wonderful thing, but it also can be an utterly terrible thing. And it's on this spectrum, and you have to figure out what you're going to do with it. Yeah,
that's an interesting point. I don't Cameron is one of those kind of squirrely filmmakers, and he talks about influences, but I don't think he wants to ever be seen as a intellectual. He's not a guy who went to school. He's a guy who reads his, he learned to do filmmaking by going to the libraries of University of Southern California and reading the theses on special effects.
Yeah, well, he's driving trucks.
Yeah, it's I'm curious about matte painting. I'm going to read 300 pages on actually how it works.
And then he worked on Escape from New York, right?
Exactly. He did the matte paintings for Escape from New York. It's that kind of thing. So I don't think he has that much respect for the idea of theory or things like that.
Yeah.
But I'd be curious.
He wouldn't be consciously referencing this.
No, but I'd be curious as to what his awareness is, because whenever he does make influence points, whenever he talks to references, he always kind of speaks in broad strokes, something that's popular. So even though with the press tour around Avatar, when he was kind of combating some of the notions of it being derivative, he acknowledged that, like, yeah, Dances with Wolves and Lawrence of Arabia and John Carter of Mars, those are all influences because they're all this idea of like the outsider entering into like a strange foreign world and becoming like a great warrior within that world. But I don't think like his heart's not in the reference. It's just like he's never going to go deeper because he's not that interested in it. It's like, well, I made it up. He put together 50 pages, proving that like I've thought of Avatar since I was 17 and I was thinking about when I was 25 and actually the Abyss and the other things were working as like prototypes for it. And it's just,
I did notice he's careful to always he has a genesis story for most of his works.
Yeah.
That claims an early source of inspiration, often in dreams. Very Miltonian.
Yeah.
Milton would wake up with a verse of Paradise Lost in his head.
Or the strange coincidences like with Titanic that he, he had just watched a early 90s documentary and then he received an invite and it was like, oh, this is the thing. And he had been interested, of course, when he was young. But.
Can I say, so like I was going to say that in terms of Titanic, like my view is quite changed quite a bit, right? Like I didn't ever like thought Titanic was a bad movie, like an outright bad movie.
Yeah.
But I didn't really like it. And now I think it's like a very good, if not great movie, maybe a great movie. I still don't know if it's sort of Romeo and Juliet story is that good. As you can sort of see in my review, I was mostly interested. I think the Rose and Jack story becomes really fascinating when it engages with the story of the ship.
Yeah.
And I think what I found very interesting about the movie that I sort of just was sort of in the back of my mind, and I feel like I didn't remember this to the same degree, was how much this was a movie that was like about like one day and one night and focused on sort of the minute by minute. Like this is also a movie for someone like myself who's loves history. Like this is also a great history buff movie because he's so meticulous in the recreation of the setting and all that sort of stuff, but also like most of the people are real characters. Mm-hmm. They know where these people were on the deck, what they were doing. We know from In Ghosts of the Abyss that the whole suggestion that maybe they were going too fast and that's why they hit the iceberg is picked up in someone's like later letter or diary where they said they overheard them having this conversation. Like, see, so this is, it's deep historicity and its interest in history is partly what made me really like it this time. And it's just a super thrilling.
Can I say though that your review, I really appreciated your analysis though of Jack and Rose and the way that Jack functions as this kind of like ghost who like ties her back to that, and like it's very interesting when I think about that the final shots of the movie take on a new like poignancy and like
I'm not saying that like, Jack isn't real because he interacts with other people, right?
Yeah, of
like
course.
he's fighting
you
and
mean
like
on a metaphorical level,
but he is
like,
in a way
he
like
represents
a ghost,
everything that
he's what could have been.
Exactly.
But he's also the spirit of adventure that wakens that thing in your life.
I can't believe I didn't say in my review that I was like, oh, R and J, Romeo and Juliet, Rose and Jack. Like, why didn't I get that he took the initials and flipped it?
Yeah, of course. But it's also like, Jack is him in a way, too.
Yeah.
Come on, he grows up around the Great Lakes. Yeah. Titanic's funny because it's that movie that, I think as a boy and growing up in the 90s, you have that allergy to it because it's the movie that girls love so much.
Yeah,
and then you finally watch it and you kind of begrudge and you're like, it's kind of cool when the ship sinks. And then you start watching, you're finally old enough to watch the Terminator movies and you're like, oh, this guy's really cool. These are really cool movies. And then you rewatch Titanic and you're like, it's actually like a pretty cool action movie in a way. And then finally, so in my estimation of Cameron, which when I finally kind of engaged with Titanic after having finally seen all of his other movies, re-engaged with it during the 2012 re-release. And I was like, oh, this is like far and away my favorite of his movies. To the point where I think it is undersold how much that movie leans into this mythic nature of like the shared trauma, the shared catharsis, how the movie is the thing that you can project onto, and like everyone can project onto. It's that, it's the thing to weep with other people about in public all together, and whatever emotions you are processing in that 3 hours and 7 minutes is like it doesn't matter what you bring to it because you're going to process it through, and it's so universal that it clearly works on everyone because it's been demonstrated for how its broad appeal is. And I think the romance works into that too, where it's you know, it's a romance that just gets consummated, but that's it. Like, it's just the tip of the beginning of something real, and then it's abruptly ended, so that you never get any of the downside of it. And it doesn't even have the Romeo and Juliet thing of a tragedy chosen, right? It's a tragedy
or
thrust upon them.
Poorly chosen.
Exactly. And so I think it's interesting when engaging something like the Jack and Rose romance, where you can be like, well, I don't know if the romance is the strongest element of the film. It's like, but that's the thing. It's an element of the film. The hour and a half romance is not the movie. It's the first hour and 30 minutes, or, it's the first of the first hour and 45 minutes. It's like the 15-minute mark to the hour and 45 mark, right?
But it also makes the finale of the movie better.
No, of course it does. But what I'm saying is that you can't ever. It's not like a segment that you can be like, well, as a romance, it's a B. And then as a disaster movie, it's an A. It's like, no. You can't view the romance outside of the disaster. It's entirely,
because it's the classic Hollywood where you put the personal story beside the larger story. You run them parallel, and then when you conclude them together. But is the sort of thing where you wouldn't care about the disaster of the ship the same way if the film didn't make you care about those.
And like I said, Cameron's been doing that for a while, because The Abyss, the resolution of their broken marriage is gonna save the world, literally, right?
Yeah.
I think maybe what I find interesting about The Abyss versus Titanic, even though, like I said, my estimation of Titanic has gone up massively, or significantly. I shouldn't say massively. I always liked it. I thought it was good. But The Abyss is different because it is the time it was made in his life when his second marriage was falling apart, and but it's such a hopeful thing. I'm always reminded of that line, like when Avatar came out, and it's like you've got this whole thing where like you bond for life, and there was a sort of snide comment someone made. How could a guy who's been married 4 times or 5 times make such a statement about marriage? And someone said, only a man who truly believes marriage is important would get married that many times, even if they didn't work out, because like, wouldn't you just give up after a couple times of trying to make this work? But no, he actually believes in something, even if you fail at it, But I think in The Abyss, there's this sort of hope that that people who are professionals, people who do have deep, have built deep roots together, can get through something, even if in the moment that they're rough. So that's what I find interesting about The Abyss, because it's like after they had their initial romance when they were building, working on building the deep core, and then drifted apart, and obviously things are basically as strange as they can possibly be, and then to be reunited in that way. So
come on, breathe, baby. God damn it, breathe. God damn you, bitch! You never backed away from anything in your life. Now fight right now. Do it. Fight, God damn it. Fight. That's it, Lindsay. That's it, Lindsay. You can do it. That's it, Lindsay. Come on back, baby. Come on. You can do it, baby.
But then it's interesting that he does the sort of more youthful, like, romance later in his life. But I think then maybe Avatar is the one that like brings it all together.
Well, it's just think about like how Cameron's movies are very much built on relationships, and it's one of those things that I haven't worked out in any of our conversations, and it's something that like it doesn't come out in the reviews because it's a total view and it's not like a specific movie thing. But all of his movies are either romances or family movies. Every single one. And that's the romance is the first, and then the family movie is the second, right? And we're going to get
Terminator,
Terminator
2. Yeah.
And it's this idea of crisis bringing out like and clarifying the importance of things, right? And this is again why Terminator 2 and The Abyss are these like interesting midpoint movies where he clarifies so much of his style, because you get it in the Terminator. You even get it in Piranha 2, stupidly enough, right? It's the idea of you have to, like, the crisis brings the family together.
Yeah. Because the sheriff and her are like, the
movie's a little bit of a rough version of the Abyss marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're too familiar with each other. Familiarity breeds contempt, but then crisis and a threat to their child brings them back together. But you
get their baby in the Abyss.
Exactly. Exactly. But like Terminator's this romance that it clarifies the important things, which is literally the survival of the human race through this child, right? Mm-hmm. The hope that is born in a romance for a star-crossed love. The aliens is the idea that even within this like colony breakdown, this military breakdown, this entire like laying bare the absolute failure of certain human ambitions. It's like, what is important here? Saving Newt. Newt's important. Like, there's this makeshift family unit, and as you laid out in your review, Anton, the idea of that the alien queen views it absolutely the opposite way, right? There's no sentimentality, there's no nothing. It's just food and bodies.
Well, it's a perverse mirror image, right?
Yeah,
it's a twisted version.
And it's just he's working on this throughout, and then you get a weird movie which we haven't picked up on yet. We haven't talked about it, but like True Lies. It's a movie about what marriage can be in various different ways, but perhaps at its most like alluring on like a sexual level, on a like an excitement level, on the idea of bringing danger back into the bedroom, kind of thing. Like
literally by going out and being spies and defeating terrorists together. Yeah.
But it's also the idea of how little lies build up and create like grand lies and almost national security threats, right?
Exactly. Because Harry Tasker's not a bad guy, but he has allowed his...
But he is lying to his wife.
Exactly.
And he's put upon by work, and he has...
Yeah.
He's got a psychopath best friend.
Rewatch. The Tom Arnold is like a psychopath. That movie. Yeah. But like, I did find True Lies, like, I don't love that movie. But your review, Anders, helped me to appreciate like the domestic comedy. I even still don't really like the action as much as his other movies. The sort of the cartoonish aspects at times are.
It's not at times.
I don't
extremely
love
cartoonish. Like
I don't love.
Remember the scene when she drops the Uzi and it just spins?
Yes, that's so funny. Where it spins down the stairs.
It's very cartoonish. Like
I mean, so for those listening, we will have a ranking of Cameron for each of us, so you can know where we ultimately land each of these. I do want to make sure we just talk about the 3 documentaries, because one great thing about this retrospective was also that I finally watched these documentaries. I'd never seen them before.
Same.
We always think of them as right. We're always told, that was just sort of minor Cameron when he wasn't doing important stuff in the 2000s. He was making these movies, and watching them back to back, I was like, oh no, like, well, one, this was important to him. He took these expeditions very seriously, and they are actually important expeditions. They're actually adding...
It's only the second time going to the Bismarck. It's only like the third time going to the Titanic.
It solved historical questions. The Titanic finally got footage of the inside, and then with the ROVs capturing imagery of the creatures that live by the underwater vents.
Oh, man. There's that scene in Aliens of the Deep when the like giant squid goes by.
Oh yeah, pops up.
Sorry, not a giant squid, a colossal squid. But
yeah.
And then there's some of these creatures they find, like they're like, even the marine biology is like, I don't really know what that thing is. It's like a jellyfish.
I watched it with my boys, and they were like, my one boy was like, "Oh, that's a Dumbo squid." I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
And I looked at it, and I was like, "Oh,
cool.
it looks like a Dumbo."
It has little ears.
It has little ears that it flies around with. I was like, "That's very adorable."
That's actually one of the most beautiful animals that they find. Yeah, because some of the other stuff's like truly like nightmarish.
But watching them all together, I was like, one, I was impressed by Cameron's like I guess ability to just be like successful and competent and a leader in like other areas beyond film. Like he's clearly leading these expeditions. The way he talks with everyone, he's not an ass. He's actually just seems like very like straightforward and like setting things out, and then also like watching them all together, it's like I got affectionate for like the whole crew of like the ships, like some of the oddballs and the different pilots who I'd seen also, like 3 times.
Speaking of family, his brothers.
Yeah, and then his brothers come on.
Mike and JD, right?
Well, so in the
security
Mike
briefing
is doing the ROVs. He designed them.
3 brothers.
And then in the third one, his one brother. And Cameron has some sort of joke about like this is his like crap job number or whatever. And I was like, I don't know what that means, so I'll just
But Mike is the guy who operates the ROVs really and built them, right?
And built them and designed them.
But don't you love how personalized they become towards Jake and Elwood? How like they're like, oh, I don't want to lose this little buddy down in the Titanic.
Well,
We
they have
gotta
to
go
like rescue him. Yeah.
And Anton, truly one of the great. It is almost too ridiculous, the scene. The fact that when they come up, it's 9/11 and like Bill Paxton
like
stops them.
The day they rescue Jake and Elwood.
Yes.
They come up and they're just like,
It's a thing that's going on.
Worst terrorist attack in history, Jim.
We all were very wrapped up in what we were doing, and we all thought it was desperately important.
By two separate hijacked commercial jets.
And then this horrible event happened.
But also just the themes. It's like it's your one in a century tragedy that like. It's one of those things I was thinking of during the 2012 theatrical 3D re-release of Titanic. It's like some of these people watching the movie, their touchstone is 9/11. And that's the like shared tragedy that everybody has witnessed. And you're processing that crap while watching this movie. Like,
and those are distinct events from, say, I was thinking about how, I teach a course on plagues, pandemic, but like, things like COVID, things like World War I, which are obviously larger scale, whether global or entire continent, but they're cataclysms on like a civilizational level.
They also take place over a long period of time.
Yeah, and people will always be like you'll always remember like aspects of those. But the difference between, say, like, but then the reason why 9/11 is like a Titanic is because that's that singular event which shocks the world. Right, it's a particular tragedy of thousands of people, and unforeseen, and like people were in 1912, like being like, "Oh my goodness, like I can't believe this happened."
But remember, the technology also allows the trauma to permeate globally. So they make a key point in Ghost of the Abyss is that the Telegraph allows that morning's paper is Titanic tragedy, thousands die at sea.
Yeah,
like everybody the next day knows that all these people died in the middle of the Atlantic. It's like, oh my God,
that's the
what just
equivalent
happened?
of like people waking up and seeing the news and seeing the Twin Towers.
Literally watching the towers fall live. Like we watched that.
Exactly, we saw it. Number 2, yeah.
I think it's like it's easy to undersell Cameron when we're talking about like popular filmmaking. We're talking about his technological capabilities and the fact that he is like pitching to these universal stories that move us, that draw us towards like the cinema or just the like shared experiences, emotional experiences that we have with each other. Like he seems to be very much, even though in Expedition Bismarck, there's the scene where they're taking the photo before they go down. He's like, this is me smiling. This is the most you'll get. Like he likes to present himself. I'm like, I'm a hard ass, Yeah. I'm not like an emotional guy. And it's like, you're the biggest, like you made a 3-hour 3D epic about like tree hugging that you want people to cry about. Like it's just so funny. It's like your movies prove the lie. Like you care so much about audiences changing their lives watching this.
So what would be like to maybe wrap up, to keep this short, like what's a short key takeaway that you come away with for Cameron? Because mine would be that watching all of his movies in a row, I came away with thinking that wow, I never realized how thematically coherent his body of works is, that he keeps returning to the same preoccupations.
Yeah, there's no movie that doesn't explore those things.
No. Is there anything else that like would be a quick takeaway that you're sort of like, wow, like that
I was just struck by how much his films engaged on an emotional level, because we've talked so much about the technical and the professionalism and all those kind of things, but like even in the documentaries there's it's not like the Spielbergian wonder per se, but
it's a different emotion.
but there's a deep like emotional engagement with other human beings and with the events that we go through that bind us together, and I think that also crosses through all his films.
I feel like it's weird for a guy who's so known for action, because he seems to have such a deep reverence for life that comes across in his movies, and you get it in all of them. Like you get Aliens, the like, even Bishop, right? His heroic going out there and getting torn in half by the alien queen, and it's this like, no, we have to protect the girl. You get the thumbs up at the end of T2. You get the Titanic, maybe the scene that like might kill me the most, which is the gentlemen, it's been an honor playing with you tonight, the quartet, and then they walk away and they turn back around and they keep playing the music, and it's just like that's it's so insane that they would keep playing that music. And they did, historically.
Yeah.
They did keep playing the music as the ship went down over the 2.5 hours.
Gentlemen, it has been a privilege playing with you tonight.
But and then you get, Avatar, you get the moments in the climax of, characters dying like Trudy and Sute, but you also get the horror at nature's destruction. You get that shot of the horse running on fire, which just like gets me. So it's I find it like terrifying, because it's just this idea of destruction of nature that's like, that horse never asked for it. Like he just seems to be able to tap into that deep emotional thing, which is weird when you're coming in a movie that like, you're getting guys like speared or like heads blown off, or in Terminator movies, like how many people just get absolutely murked.
Yeah.
But he really does seem to have that reverence for humanity and that deep appreciation of life. And like, his documentaries are not his greatest works. I think, in terms of the grand scale things, they are minor, but they're interesting and they're instructive and they do fit in with the rest. But there's that shot in Ghost of the Abyss, the first time they see the Titanic, right? And it's the bow of the ship and it is towering and it's almost like a giant gravestone under the water. And you're just like, oh my goodness. Like you're just kind of like taken aback for a second. You're like,
we forget,
oh yeah, that's
again,
it.
how big it was.
Yeah.
How big, and it's real. And there was people there. And like his movies always point back to the fact that like, no, this isn't just entertainment. This isn't just 3 hours fun with your friends and family. Like and he wants it to be that, but he always is reminding it's like, no, there's a meaning, there's a deeper thing, and there's something that you need to understand about like what is valuable in these stories we tell each other and what they remind us about each other. He's extremely corny. He really is. He's sentimental, but I think it works, especially with that scale.
I order you not to go. I order you not to go.
I know now why you cry. But it's something I can never do.
I hope you got something out of this conversation. I hope you've been following along with the retrospective, or if you haven't, check out at 3brothersfilm.com. We've got very in-depth reviews of all these movies, and we also got the YouTube video essay, which just offers a 6-minute kind of intro to his films. So I hope you find these instructive, especially as I'm going to assume you're going to go see Boy of Water, even if you maybe are. No, you're going to see it. Everybody's going to see it. So thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Goodbye, Mr. Bond. I bid you farewell.